The chandelier light of the West Point Gala Hall glittered above me, casting diamond-like reflections across the sea of dress uniforms. Crystal glasses clinked in perfect rhythm against the backdrop of measured conversation and carefully curated laughter. I adjusted the collar of my uniform, feeling the weight of my father's dog tags hidden beneath my shirt, pressed against my heart like a secret oath. Major David Reynolds had been gone for 18 months, but his presence in this room was undeniable. The medical unit he built from nothing over 20 years at Fort Bragg had become his legacy, and my inheritance, though not in the way most people understood inheritance. I didn't want his possessions. I wanted to honor his vision. "Captain Reynolds, you seem distracted tonight." The voice belonged to Lieutenant Sarah Chen, one of my most trusted colleagues in the medical corps. Her dark eyes studied me with the same precision she used when assessing patients in the field. "Just thinking about Dad," I admitted. He loved these formal dinners. Said it reminded him why we do what we do, that behind all the protocols and regulations, we're still human. Sarah smiled. He was right. Though I think some people in this room might have missed that memo. Her eyes drifted toward the head of the table where Colonel Charles Harlow held court. At 53, Harlow was the picture of military precision. Silver hair cropped close to his skull, uniform so crisp it could cut paper, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Since my father's passing, he'd made it clear that the Reynolds Medical Unit was a prize he intended to claim through his nephew, Ryan. "Don't let him get to you, Jessica," Sarah whispered. "Your father built something special, and everyone knows it. The colonel is just playing politics." "Politics gets people killed in our line of work," I replied, taking a measured sip of water. "Dad used to say, 'Captain Reynolds!'" Colonel Harlow's voice boomed across the table, silencing several conversations at once. "I trust you're enjoying yourself this evening." The attention of 24 officers suddenly shifted to me. I straightened my spine, muscle memory from years at West Point. "Yes, sir. It's a beautiful event." "Indeed. After all, celebrations are in order." His smile widened as he gestured to a young man beside him, Ryan Harlow, his nephew, who had somehow managed to secure a lieutenant's commission, despite having the medical expertise of a houseplant. "Lieutenant Harlow has just completed his administrative leadership course. Perfect timing, wouldn't you say?" The room seemed to shrink around me. I could feel Sarah tense beside me. "Timing for what, sir?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The colonel's eyes gleamed with triumph as he motioned to his aide. The young corporal approached with a leather portfolio and placed it before his superior. Harlow opened it with theatrical slowness, removing a set of documents bound with the official military seal. "For the future of the Reynolds Medical Unit, of course." He slid the papers across the polished mahogany toward me. The folder stopped precisely at my water glass. "My nephew will be assuming command next month. These are the transfer orders." The room fell into a hush so complete I could hear the ice settling in water glasses. I stared at the folder, my father's name printed in bold on the cover page, now crossed out with a single line. Beside it, in fresh ink, "LT Ryan Harlow, commanding." Colonel Harlow's voice cut through my shock. "You'll still—" "Get your cut, Captain. 25% of the operational budget as consulting fees. A generous arrangement, don't you think?" Laughter rippled around the table. Not everyone joined in, but enough did that the sound burned into my memory. 25%. As if my father's life's work was a business transaction. As if I could be bought off with a percentage. I looked up to find General Marcus Brooks watching from the far end of the table. The 3-star general's weathered face betrayed nothing, but his eyes, sharp as surgical instruments, missed nothing. He'd served with my father in Desert Storm. They weren't friends exactly, but there had always been a mutual respect between them. "Well, Captain," Colonel Harlow prompted. "Nothing to say? That's unusual for a Reynolds." More laughter. My cheeks burned, but the anger blazing through my chest was ice-cold and clarifying. With deliberate movements, I reached into my own bag hanging from my chair. The room watched as I withdrew the thick Army Medical Corps regulations binder I'd carried with me for months, anticipating this exact moment. My father's voice echoed in my memory. In the military, Jessica, knowing the rules isn't just protocol, it's protection. I placed the binder on the table and opened it to the page marked with a red tab. Section 4.3. My insurance policy against precisely this kind of maneuver. "With respect, Colonel," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, "I do have something to say." I stood, shoulders back, chin lifted. The chandelier light caught my captain's bars as I flipped the binder around so the text faced him. All medical units, I read aloud, my voice cutting through the room, must remain under the command of credentialed officers who have completed military medical leadership training. Section 4.3 specifically prohibits nepotism in medical unit leadership appointments and requires a minimum of 3 years of active medical field service. I closed the binder with a soft thud that somehow echoed like a gunshot. Lieutenant Harlow has neither the credentials nor the field experience required by regulation. His administrative course doesn't qualify him for medical leadership. The laughter had died. Colonel Harlow's face had flushed deep crimson, his knuckles white around his fork. Furthermore, I continued, the consulting fee arrangement described would violate Section 6.2 regarding improper financial distributions within military medical operations. I looked directly at General Brooks, whose jaw had visibly tightened. His fingers pressed into the table as his gaze shifted from me to Colonel Harlow. Captain Reynolds, the colonel finally sputtered, this is hardly the venue. I believe Captain Reynolds has raised a relevant point regarding protocol, General Brooks interrupted, his deep voice silencing the room instantly. Colonel Harlow, I'll see you in my office tomorrow at 800 to review these arrangements. For the first time in my military career, I watched Colonel Charles Harlow freeze in complete silence. My father's medical unit at Fort Bragg wasn't just a collection of doctors, nurses, and medics. It was a family forged in blood and bandages. Growing up, I'd visit him there during school breaks, watching from the corner as he moved between beds with the same gentle authority he used when bandaging my skinned knees at home. The uniform doesn't make the soldier, Jess, he'd tell me. It's what beats underneath it. The morning after the officers' dinner, I walked through the unit's doors. The memory of my father. So strong I could almost smell his aftershave mixing with antiseptic. The administrative wing was quiet, most of the staff not due for another hour. I preferred these moments alone, before the day's chaos began. I'd just settled at my desk when a sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. Sarah Chen stood in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Thought you might need this after last night's fireworks. She placed 1 cup in front of me and took the seat opposite. The whole base is talking about it. You really blindsided the colonel. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. I didn't blindside him. I just knew the regulations better than he did. Because you've been preparing for months. Sarah's smile was knowing. I've seen that binder in your bag every day since your father passed. Dad always said knowledge is the best defense. Sarah leaned forward. Well, your defense worked. General Brooks has called a formal review of Colonel Harlow's proposal. Word is, the colonel's furious. I took a sip of coffee, the bitter warmth steadying me. He can be as furious as he wants. The regulations are clear. It's not just about regulations, Jess. The colonel has connections. People who owe him favors. You embarrassed him in front of everyone who matters. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with a message. General Brooks's office, immediate meeting requested. I showed Sarah the screen. Guess I'm about to find out how many favors those connections are worth. General Marcus Brooks' office was a testament to 30 years of military service. Battle maps from 3 wars, commendations displayed without ostentation, and a desk that had seen more tactical decisions than most officers would make in a lifetime. The general himself stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed over the parade grounds. He didn't turn when I entered. Captain Reynolds, he acknowledged, prompt as always. You requested my presence, sir. He turned then, his weathered face inscrutable. I did. Take a seat. I sat back straight, preparing myself for whatever was coming. Your father, Brooks began surprising me, was one of the finest medical officers I've ever served with. During the Gulf War, our unit was hit. Bad. Your father operated for 18 straight hours without a break, saved 16 men who should have died by any reasonable medical assessment. He moved to his desk, opening a drawer to remove an old photograph. He slid it across to me. My father, much younger, standing beside a blood-covered operating table. His eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much, but kept going anyway. He never mentioned this, I said softly. He wouldn't have. David wasn't one to discuss his achievements. Brooks reclaimed the photo, studying it before returning it to the drawer. Colonel Harlow was there too, you know. Lieutenant Harlow back then. Your father saved his life that day. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had no idea. Few do. The colonel doesn't like to acknowledge debts. Brooks's expression hardened, which makes his current behavior all the more disappointing. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Send them in. The door opened and Colonel Harlow entered, followed by his nephew. Both men's faces were masks of professional neutrality, but tension radiated from them in almost visible waves. "Sir," Harlow acknowledged, pointedly ignoring my presence. "Colonel Lieutenant," General Brooks gestured to the remaining chairs. "Let's get to it. I've reviewed the transfer proposal. For the Reynolds Medical Unit, along with the relevant regulations Captain Reynolds cited last night." Colonel Harlow cleared his throat. "Sir, if I may—" "You may not, Colonel." Brooks' voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "The regulations are unambiguous. Lieutenant Harlow is not qualified to command the medical unit. Period." Ryan Harlow shifted uncomfortably in his chair while his uncle's jaw worked soundlessly. "Furthermore," the general continued, "the proposed financial arrangement is inappropriate at best, potentially criminal at worst." "With respect, General," Colonel Harlow finally managed, "the Reynolds unit requires strong leadership. Captain Reynolds is too emotionally invested." "Emotional investment is precisely what made Major Reynolds' unit exceptional," Brooks cut in. "Captain Reynolds has demonstrated the same dedication, plus the training and field experience the position requires." He fixed the colonel with a hard stare. "Or are you suggesting that the Army's regulations regarding medical leadership are optional?" The silence that followed was deafening. "No, sir," Colonel Harlow finally said, his voice tight. General Brooks nodded. "Good. Then it's, settled. Captain Reynolds will assume full command of the medical unit, effective immediately. And Colonel," his voice dropped dangerously low, "there will be a formal inquiry into this attempt to circumvent military regulations." The colonel's face had gone pale. "Yes, sir." "Lieutenant Harlow," Brooks turned to the younger man, "you're reassigned to the General Medical Corps. Perhaps with proper training and experience, you might earn a leadership position someday. On merit. Dismissed, gentlemen." Colonel Harlow rose stiffly, his nephew following suit. Neither looked in my direction as they left. When the door closed, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Thank you, sir," I said quietly. General Brooks studied me for a long moment. "Don't thank me for enforcing regulations, Captain. That's the bare minimum of my job." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "Your father would be proud. Not because you won, but because you fought the right way." I felt the weight of my father's dog tags against my chest. He taught me that the how matters as much as the what. A lesson many never learn, Brooks agreed. "The colonel won't forget this, you know. Men like Harlow don't take defeat graciously." "I understand, sir." "Good." He nodded toward the door. "You have a medical unit waiting for its new commanding officer, Captain. I suggest you get to it." As I left the general's office, the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the parade grounds. Ahead, the medical building stood solid and familiar, no longer just my father's legacy, but now my responsibility. Whatever Colonel Harlow might plan next, I would be ready. For now, though, I had work to do, lives to save, a unit to lead, just as my father had taught me. The Reynolds Medical Unit buzzed with activity as I entered through the main doors, now as its official commanding officer. The familiar antiseptic smell mixed with coffee and the low hum of medical equipment greeted me like an old friend. This place had been my second home since childhood, watching my father move through these same hallways with quiet authority. Now it was mine to lead. "Attention on deck!" Staff Sergeant Miller called out as I walked into the main ward. The medical staff snapped to attention, some faces showing surprise, others relief. "At ease," I said, feeling strangely formal in a space where I'd once played hide-and-seek between empty gurneys. "I have an announcement." They gathered around, doctors, nurses, medics, and support staff. Some I'd known for years, others new faces I was still learning. Behind their professional expressions, I could read the uncertainty. Rumors traveled fast on a military base, and everyone knew about the power struggle over the unit's future. "As of Aero 900 this morning, I've been appointed commanding officer of the Reynolds Medical Unit by direct order of General Brooks." I paused, letting the information settle. "Nothing changes about our mission. We continue to provide the best possible care to our soldiers, just as this unit has always done." Relief visibly swept through the group. Sergeant Miller, who'd served with my father for 15 years, broke into a rare smile. "About damn time," he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Dr. Levinson, our chief surgeon and my father's closest friend, stepped forward. "What about Colonel Harlow's nephew? Last we heard, he was taking over." "Lieutenant Harlow has been reassigned," I replied evenly, careful to keep any hint of triumph from my voice. The general determined that leadership of this unit requires specific qualifications outlined in Section 4.3 of the Medical Corps Regulations. A few knowing glances were exchanged. Many of them had watched me studying that regulation manual for months, preparing for this exact fight. Now, I continued, I want status reports from each department head by end of day. We've got a new deployment rotation coming up, and I need to know exactly where we stand on personnel, equipment, and training. As the group dispersed, Dr. Levinson lingered behind. Your father would be proud, Jessica, he said quietly, though I suspect Colonel Harlow isn't done causing trouble. I nodded, keeping my voice low. General Brooks said the same thing. The general's right. Charles Harlow doesn't forgive easily, and he doesn't forget at all. Levinson's eyes, sharp despite his 60 years, held genuine concern. Watch your back. The first week passed in a blur of administrative catches, inventory reviews, and personnel assessments. I stayed late each night, learning the minutiae of command that went beyond medical expertise. Budget allocations, rotation schedules, equipment requisitions, and the endless political navigation required to keep a medical unit functioning in the bureaucratic maze of military administration. My father had made it look effortless. It wasn't. On Friday evening, as I was reviewing deployment readiness reports, a knock on my office door pulled me from the paperwork. Come in, I called, expecting Dr. Levinson or perhaps Sarah with last-minute updates. Instead, Lieutenant Ryan Harlow stood in my doorway, his posture rigid, expression unreadable. Lieutenant, I acknowledged, surprised. What can I do for you? He entered but remained standing, declining my gesture toward a chair. I wanted to speak with you directly, Captain. I leaned back, evaluating him. Unlike his uncle, Ryan had always been something of an enigma. Quiet, reserved, difficult to read. Now that, I looked closer. I could see the family resemblance in the set of his jaw, but there was something different in his eyes. Something less calculating than the colonel's cold ambition. I'm listening, I said. I want to apologize. His words came out stiffly, as though rehearsed. What my uncle tried to do with your father's medical unit, it wasn't my idea. I studied him, looking for signs of deception. But you went along with it. Yes. No excuses, no justification. Just the simple admission. Why come tell me this now? I asked. The matter's been settled. Ryan shifted his weight, the first crack in his formal demeanor, because I'm going to request a transfer out of Fort Bragg entirely. This surprised me. That's not necessary. General Brooks's reassignment isn't about the general's orders, he interrupted. It's about doing what's right. My uncle, he paused, choosing his words carefully. My uncle has made it clear he intends to make your command difficult. I don't want to be his instrument in that. The admission hung between us, unexpected and loaded with implications. He sent you to tell me this? I asked. Ryan shook his head. He doesn't know I'm here. In fact, he'd be furious if he knew. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The colonel has very specific ideas about family loyalty. Yet, here you are. Yes. He met my gaze directly. Your father saved my uncle's life during Desert Storm. The whole time I was growing up, Colonel Harlow told that story as evidence of his own resilience. It wasn't until I met your father myself during a medical rotation that I learned the truth, that he had no business surviving those injuries, that Major Reynolds performed a miracle that day. I swallowed against the sudden tightness in my throat. My father never mentioned it. He wouldn't. Ryan's expression softened. When I told him I was the colonel's nephew, he just smiled and said, Every patient deserves the same care, son, regardless of who they are or who they're related to. That stuck with me. A silence settled between us, the ghost of my father somehow present in the room. Thank you for telling me this, I finally said. Ryan nodded, turning to leave before pausing at the door. Captain Reynolds, whatever my uncle does next, it won't be subtle, and it won't be small. Be prepared. The warning lingered in the air long after he'd gone. The next morning brought clarity to Ryan's cryptic warning. I arrived at the unit to find Sarah waiting outside my office, her expression tight with concern. We've been cut, she said without preamble as soon as my door closed behind us. 40% of our operational budget effective immediately. I sank into my chair, the implications cascading through my mind. How? Budget? Allocations were finalized last quarter. Emergency reallocation due to shifting strategic priorities, she quoted, sliding a memo across my desk. Signed by Colonel Harlow as head of the Base Resource Committee. The document was perfect in its bureaucratic brutality, technically within Harlow's authority, carefully worded to appear necessary rather than vindictive, and devastating in its practical effects. This will cripple our deployment readiness, I said, scanning the details. We'll lose half our training capacity and most of our new equipment requisitions. Sarah nodded grimly. Not just that, the timing is suspicious. We're scheduled for a readiness evaluation next month. With these cuts, we'll fail, I finished. And a failed readiness evaluation is grounds for unit reorganization, which would put control back in the hands of the base command structure, directly under Colonel Harlow. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Unable to take direct control of the unit, he would force it to fail and then step in to fix the problem he'd created. I tapped my fingers on the desk, thinking through options. Direct appeal to General Brooks would look like I couldn't handle my command. Accepting the cuts would doom the unit to failure. Fighting through official channels would take months we didn't have. What did your father do when backed into a corner? Sarah asked quietly. I looked up at her, a memory suddenly crystallizing. He got creative, and he never fought alone. Standing, I grabbed my jacket. Call an emergency staff meeting. All department heads, senior medical personnel, and NCOs. 1 hour. What are you going to do? I was already heading for the door. Something my father taught me a long time ago. In medicine and in war, sometimes you have to create your own solutions when the system fails you. The base library was nearly empty at this hour, most personnel occupied with morning duties. I found what I was looking for in the archives section, complete records of Fort Bragg's operational history, meticulously maintained in both digital and physical formats. My father had shown me these archives years ago, explaining how understanding the past often revealed solutions for the present. History doesn't repeat, he'd told me, but it rhymes. Listen for the pattern. I was listening now, searching for a specific rhythm in the base's institutional memory. 3 hours and dozens of files later, I found it. Operation Ghost Protocol. I announced to the assembled staff in our conference room, the name drawing confused looks from everyone except Dr. Levinson, whose eyebrows shot up in recognition. Jessica, he cautioned. That was highly irregular, even when your father implemented it. Exactly why it will work. Again, I replied, turning to address the group. In 1997, during preparations for a major deployment to Bosnia, the Reynolds Medical Unit faced a similar budget crisis. Rather than accepting reduced capability, Major David Reynolds created what he called Ghost Protocol, an unofficial resource-sharing network between various units on base. I displayed an old organizational chart on the screen, my father's handwriting visible in the margins. Each participating unit contributed small amounts of resources, equipment, or personnel hours, all below reporting thresholds, which collectively restored our operational capacity without triggering administrative oversight. Staff Sergeant Miller leaned forward, squinting at the screen. I remember this. We called it the invisible supply chain. Base command never caught on because no single transfer was large enough to flag in the system. And because everyone benefited, Dr. Levinson added. Your father made sure the medical unit provided services in return. Priority care, additional training, medical support for exercises. I nodded. Exactly. It was a barter system operating within the gaps of the official logistics framework. Sarah looked skeptical. That was almost 30 years ago. The monitoring systems are much more sophisticated now. True, I conceded. But so are our capabilities. And more importantly, I've identified 7 unit commanders currently at Fort Bragg who either served with my father or were treated by this unit during deployments. I displayed their names on screen. Colonel Harlow might have the Base Resource Committee, but we have something more valuable. A network of people who understand what this medical unit means to the soldiers on this base. Dr. Rivera, our head of emergency medicine, shook her head. It's still risky. If Colonel Harlow discovers what we're doing, he'll claim we're circumventing proper channels. I finished for her. Which is exactly what he's done by manipulating the resource allocation process. The difference is, we'll be doing it to maintain medical readiness for our troops, not to settle a personal vendetta. I looked around the room, meeting each person's gaze. I'm not ordering anyone to participate. This has to be voluntary. If you feel the risk is too great, I understand. Silence fell as they considered the implications. Then Staff E. Sergeant Miller stood. Major Reynolds saved my life in Afghanistan, pulled me out of a burning Humvee and patched me up right there under fire. He straightened to attention. The Reynolds unit has always done whatever it takes to care for our people. I'm in. One by one, the others stood. First Dr. Levinson, then Sarah, then the rest, until the entire room was on its feet. All right then, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady against the surge of emotion. Let's get to work. Operation Ghost Protocol came together with surprising speed. Each department identified critical shortfalls and potential workarounds. We created a decentralized communication system using secure channels normally reserved for field medical coordination. By end of day, we had commitments from 4-unit commanders willing to participate in our unofficial resource network. The first test came 3 days later, when we received notice of an unexpected training exercise requiring full field hospital deployment. Precisely the kind of operation our budget cuts had compromised. Under normal circumstances, we would have reported inability to comply due to resource constraints. Instead, equipment began. Arriving from across the base, 2 communications units from the Signal Corps, a generator from engineering, medical supplies from the Airborne Division's reserves, and transport support from the motor pool. None of the transfers appeared in official channels. All were logged as training loans or maintenance rotations, legitimate designations that wouldn't trigger administrative review. By dawn, we had a fully operational field hospital set up on the training grounds, ready for inspection. When Colonel Harlow arrived with his evaluation team, the surprise on his face was worth every hour of sleep lost in the preparation. "Impressive deployment, Captain Reynolds," he said, his tone carefully neutral as he surveyed the facility, "especially given your recent budget adjustments." "The Reynolds unit has always been resourceful, sir," I replied. "My father believed in being prepared for any contingency." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Indeed, though I wonder how you've managed to maintain full equipment complement despite the reallocation." "Efficient resource management, Colonel. Everything here is properly logged and accounted for." It wasn't a lie. Every piece of equipment was documented, just not in the way Harlow assumed. He circled the field hospital, looking for deficiencies, finding none. The evaluation team conducted thorough inspections of all systems, protocols, and readiness metrics. By midday, they had to concede that the Reynolds Medical Unit was fully operational and deployment ready, despite the budget cuts. As Colonel Harlow was leaving, he paused beside me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "This isn't over, Captain. There are regulations against unofficial resource sharing." I met his gaze steadily. "Just as there are regulations against using budget allocations for personal vendettas, sir. Section 8.2 of the Base Resource Management Code, if I'm not mistaken." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing more before striding away. That evening, as the staff was breaking down the field hospital, Sarah found me reviewing the evaluation results. "Perfect scores across all categories," she said, dropping into the chair beside me. "The colonel must be furious." "He is," I confirmed, "and he's already guessed what we're doing." "Will he report it?" I shook my head. "Not yet. He doesn't have proof, and making accusations would raise questions about his budget cuts. But he'll be watching more closely now, looking for mistakes." Sarah studied my face. "You don't seem worried." "I'm not," I realized, somewhat surprised by my own calm. "Because we're right and he's wrong. We're doing this to maintain medical readiness for our troops. He's doing what he's doing out of pride and spite." I closed the evaluation report. A plan, already forming for our next move. My father used to say that in medicine there's no room for ego. The patient's needs always come first. The same applies here. This unit exists to save lives, not to satisfy Colonel Harlow's wounded pride. Sarah smiled. "So, what's our next move? We keep Ghost Protocol running, but we expand it. Not just to maintain our operations, but to improve them." Leaned forward, energized by the challenge. "By the time Colonel Harlow figures out exactly what we're doing, we'll have created something too valuable for even General Brooks to dismantle." As we walked out into the evening air, the lights of Fort Bragg spreading out before us, I felt my father's presence stronger than ever. Not as a ghost, but as a guiding principle. The way forward wouldn't be easy, but it would be right. And in the end, that was what mattered most. 6 weeks into Operation Ghost Protocol, we'd achieved what seemed impossible. Not only maintaining our operational capacity despite the budget cuts, but actually improving it. Our unofficial resource network had expanded to include 11 units across Fort Bragg, creating a web of mutual support that benefited everyone involved. The motor pool received priority medical clearances for their drivers. The Signal Corps got specialized field trauma training. The engineering battalion received custom medical kits designed for their specific deployment risks. In return, we received equipment loans, personnel assistance, and creative solutions to our resource limitations. It wasn't just about survival anymore, we were thriving. But Colonel Harlow wasn't one to accept defeat gracefully. His direct attacks had failed, so he changed tactics, becoming meticulous in his oversight. Every requisition form, every personnel assignment, every training record from the Reynolds unit was scrutinized for errors or policy violations. The administrative burden was enormous, designed to drown us in paperwork while he searched for any crack in our armor. He's requested another audit, Sarah said, dropping a thick folder on my desk one Tuesday morning. Third one this month. I rubbed my eyes, fighting fatigue after another late night reviewing documentation. What's the pretext this time? Discrepancy in equipment maintenance schedules. She sank into the chair across from me. It's paper thin, but it'll tie up Dr. Rivera's team for days. That's the point, I said. He can't shut us down directly, so he's trying to exhaust us into making mistakes. Sarah studied my face. It's working, Jessica. You haven't left the base in weeks. When was the last time you slept more than 4 hours? I waved away her concern. I'm fine. The unit is what matters. Your father would disagree, she said quietly. He always said a commander who doesn't take care of themselves can't take care of their people. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a message from the front desk. Lieutenant Ryan Harlow was requesting to see me. Speaking of the enemy camp, I muttered, showing Sarah the message. Her eyebrows rose. What does he want? Let's find out. I straightened my uniform, pushing away fatigue. Send him. In. Ryan entered my office with the same formal bearing I remembered from our last meeting. But today, something was different. A tension in his shoulders, a wariness in his eyes. Captain Reynolds? He greeted me. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. What can I do for you, Lieutenant? He glanced at Sarah, then back to me. I was hoping to speak with you privately. Sarah looked to me for direction. I nodded and she left, closing the door behind her. I've been reassigned, Ryan said once we were alone. Joint Base Lewis McCord, I leave next week. Congratulations on the new posting, I said, though we both knew it wasn't a promotion. It was exile, punishment for his disloyalty to his uncle. Before I go, there's something you should know. He reached into his jacket, withdrawing a sealed envelope. My uncle has been building a case against you. Administrative violations, misappropriation of resources, falsification of readiness reports. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. All false allegations. Not entirely. Ryan placed the envelope on my desk. Ghost protocol leaves traces, Captain. Small ones, but they're there if you know where to look. And my uncle has been looking very carefully. I stared at the envelope, not reaching for it. Why are you telling me this? Ryan's expression softened slightly. Because what he's doing isn't about regulations or proper procedure. It's about revenge, not just against you, but against your father's memory. And against you, I added, seeing the truth in his eyes, for choosing sides. Ghost of a smile touched his lips. I didn't choose sides, Captain. I chose integrity, something I learned from observing your father during my brief rotation in this unit. I finally took the envelope, feeling the weight of its contents. What exactly am I looking at? Copies of the documentation my uncle has been gathering. Delivery schedules, maintenance logs, personnel assignments, all highlighting the discrepancies that reveal your unofficial resource network. His voice lowered. He's presenting his findings to General Brooks next week, after I've gone. The implications were clear. Colonel Harlow had found the proof he needed. Ghost protocol would be exposed, and with it, my command would be compromised. Why risk bringing this to me? I asked. If your uncle discovers what you've done, he won't, Ryan interrupted. As far as he knows, I'm fully supportive of his crusade against the Reynolds legacy. It's easier that way, for both of us. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, the sound of a family relationship fractured beyond repair. Thank you, I said simply. Ryan nodded, turning to leave before pausing at the door. Captain Reynolds, whatever you decide to do next, I'd do it quickly. After he left, I opened the envelope with unsteady hands. Inside were dozens of pages of meticulously documented evidence. Times, dates, equipment transfers, personnel movements, all painting a clear picture of Operation Ghost Protocol. Colonel Harlow had been more thorough than I'd anticipated, tracing connections I thought were invisible. The case he'd built was damning. I picked up my phone. Sarah, find Dr. Levinson and Staff Sergeant Miller. Emergency meeting, my office, 10 minutes. He's got us, Dr. Levinson said grimly after reviewing the documents. These discrepancies are small individually, but collectively they establish a pattern. Staff Sergeant Miller paced the small office, tension radiating from his stocky frame. So we shut down. Ghost protocol. Return all equipment to original units. Eliminate the paper trail. Sarah shook her head. Too late for that. The evidence is already documented. Dismantling the network now just looks like an admission of guilt. She's right, I said. Besides, without Ghost protocol, we can't maintain operational readiness. We'd be confirming Colonel Harlow's original claim that the unit can't function under current budget constraints. Levinson studied me over his reading glasses. You have another idea. It wasn't a question. He'd known me too long, had seen the same expression on my father's face countless times when conventional solutions failed. We don't hide from the evidence, I said slowly. We embrace it. Make it public before Colonel Harlow can present it privately to General Lau. Brooks. 3 confused faces stared back at me. We're going to leak our own operation? Sarah asked incredulously. Not leak. Publish. I picked up one of the documents, a cleverly disguised equipment transfer logged as a maintenance rotation. What Colonel Harlow sees as evidence of rule breaking, I see as innovation. What he calls misappropriation, I call resource optimization. Understanding dawned on Miller's face. You want to turn Ghost Protocol from a secret operation into an official program. Exactly. I stood, energy surging through my exhaustion. We compile all our data, not just the discrepancies, but the results. The improved readiness metrics, the cost savings, the enhanced training outcomes. We present it as a case study in adaptive resource management under budget constraints. To who? Sarah asked. General Brooks? Higher, I replied. The Armed Services Medical Logistics Command. They've been pushing for more efficient resource utilization models for years. We submit Ghost Protocol as a pilot program that's already proving successful. Levinson leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. Turn defense into offense. Your father would approve. It's risky, Sarah cautioned. If we don't get command approval before Harlow presents his evidence, that's why we need to move fast, I interrupted. Colonel Harlow expects me to either deny everything or scramble to cover our tracks. He doesn't expect me to go public with what we've been doing. Miller crossed his arms, nodding slowly. So, instead of facing accusations of rule-breaking, the colonel would be seen as attempting to undermine an innovative pilot program. One that's already showing results, I added. Results that directly benefit soldiers on this base. It could work, Levinson said thoughtfully, but you'll need more than just our internal data. You'll need formal endorsements from the units involved in Ghost Protocol. And documentation of all the benefits, Sarah added, warming to the idea. Not just for us, but for every participating unit. That's exactly what we'll get, I said, already mapping out the plan in my mind. Starting now. The next 5 days passed in a blur of activity. While maintaining our regular duties, we worked around the clock compiling data, gathering testimonials, and drafting a comprehensive report on Operation Ghost Protocol, now formally renamed the Integrated Resource Optimization Initiative. Every participating unit commander was briefed individually. Most were initially alarmed at the prospect of our unofficial arrangement becoming public, but the alternative, having it exposed as misconduct, was worse. One by one, they agreed to support the initiative officially, providing written endorsements detailing specific benefits their units had received. Captain James Rodriguez from engineering was particularly enthusiastic. The custom medical kits your team designed for our high-altitude work saved one of my men last month. If Colonel Harlow wants to call that misappropriation of resources, he can explain it to Rodriguez's wife and kids. By Thursday night, we had assembled a 40-page report with supporting documentation, testimonials, cost-benefit analyses, and a formal proposal for expanding the program Army-wide. The data was compelling. A 15% improvement in emergency response times, a 22% reduction in equipment downtime, and most importantly, enhanced medical care for soldiers despite budget limitations. It's ready, Sarah said, placing the final bound copy on my desk at 200 Friday morning. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, matching my own. Digital copies have been prepared for simultaneous distribution. Good. I stared at the report, the culmination of countless hours of work. Colonel Harlow is meeting with General Brooks at 900. We need to execute before then. Distribution list is set. Staff Sergeant Miller confirmed, checking his tablet. Armed Services, Medical Logistics Command, Army Medical Corps Leadership, Fort Bragg Command Structure, and the Defense Health Agency Innovation Office. What about media contacts? Dr. Levinson asked. Military reporters might be interested in this kind of innovation story. I shook my head. No media. That would look like we're trying to force the Army's hand through public pressure. This needs to stay within military channels to be taken seriously. Miller cleared his throat. There's still one problem. Colonel Harlow will claim you acted without proper authorization in establishing the original protocol. He will, I agreed. And he'll be right. I made that decision knowing the risks. Sarah's brow furrowed. Jessica, this was my call, I interrupted. All of you were following my orders. Whatever. Consequences come, they're mine to face. A heavy silence fell over the office. We all understood the implications. Even if our initiative was ultimately approved, I could still face disciplinary action for the way it began. Get some rest, I told them. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. At precisely 0700 Friday morning, the report titled Integrated Resource Optimization Initiative, a case. Study in Adaptive Medical Readiness was simultaneously delivered to every name on our distribution list, both digitally and in hard copy, with my signature prominently displayed as the program architect. At 0705, I sent a personal message to General Brooks requesting an urgent meeting regarding an innovative resource management program currently being piloted at Fort Bragg. At 0730, his aide confirmed the meeting for 0830, 30 minutes before his scheduled appointment with Colonel Harlow. I arrived at the General's office with Sarah and Dr. Levinson, all of us in full dress uniform, carrying additional copies of the report. The General's aide ushered us in with a curious glance, clearly sensing the gravity of the situation. General Brooks sat behind his desk, our report open before him, reading glasses perched on his nose. He didn't look up immediately, continuing to flip through pages as we stood at attention. Captain Reynolds, he finally acknowledged, removing his glasses. You've been busy. Yes, sir. This is quite a document. He tapped the cover. Particularly interesting timing, given that Colonel Harlow is scheduled to see me in 30 minutes about what he describes as serious procedural violations within your unit. I met his gaze steadily. I'm aware of the Colonel's concerns, sir. They relate directly to what's outlined in that report. I suspected as much. The General's expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. You've essentially preempted his accusations by reframing unauthorized resource sharing as an innovative pilot program. Clever. It's not just clever, sir, Dr. Levinson interjected. It's effective. The data speaks for itself. General Brooks turned his attention to Levinson. Indeed, Doctor. The results are impressive. But that doesn't change the fact that Captain Reynolds established this program without authorization. I take full responsibility for that decision, sir, I said. The budget cuts imposed on the Reynolds medical unit were severe enough to compromise our ability to fulfill our mission. I chose to find a solution rather than allow medical readiness to deteriorate. And this solution happened to circumvent Colonel Harlow's authority as head of the Base Resource Committee. That was not the primary motivation, sir. The General's eyebrow rose slightly. But a consideration nonetheless? I hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. Yes, sir. I believe the Colonel's budget cuts were personally motivated rather than strategically necessary. Brooks studied me for a long moment. That's a serious allegation, Captain. I understand that, sir. He turned back to the report, flipping to a section highlighting testimonials from unit commanders. You've secured considerable support. 11 unit commanders have endorsed this initiative, including some of my most trusted officers. The program benefits everyone involved, sir. That's why it works. The General stood, moving to the window that overlooked the parade grounds. Your father once did something similar during the Bosnia preparation, didn't he? An unofficial supply chain that kept his medical unit operational despite resource limitations. The question surprised me. Yes, sir. That was the inspiration. Brooks nodded, still gazing out the window. I remember. It was effective then, too, though on a smaller scale. He turned back to face us. Here's my dilemma, Captain. What you've created appears to be genuinely valuable to this base and potentially to the Army Medical Corps as a whole. But the way you created it violated chain of command and established resource allocation procedures. I understand, sir. Do you? He returned to his desk. Because I can't simply overlook those violations, regardless of the outcomes. Discipline and procedure exist for a reason. My heart sank, but I kept my expression neutral. Yes, sir. The General checked his watch. Colonel Harlow will be here shortly, expecting me to take action against you based on his evidence. He tapped our report. Evidence that you've now recontextualized quite effectively. He sat back in his chair, his decision apparently made. Here's what's going to happen. The Integrated Resource Optimization Initiative will be formally recognized as an official pilot program, effective immediately, under the direct supervision of my office. Hope surged through me, but the general wasn't finished. However, Captain Reynolds, you will receive an official reprimand for establishing the program without proper authorization. This will be entered into your service record. The reprimand would affect future promotion opportunities, but it was a small price to pay for saving the unit. I accept that consequence, sir. General Brooks nodded. I thought you might. Now, I suggest the three of you wait in the anteroom. I'd like you present when I meet with Colonel Harlow. We were dismissed to the general's waiting area, where Sarah immediately turned to me. A reprimand is getting off easy, she whispered. He could have relieved you of command. He still might, I cautioned. Let's not celebrate yet. At precisely 0900, Colonel Harlow arrived, a thick portfolio under his arm, confidence radiating from his precise movements. The smug satisfaction on his face disappeared when he saw us waiting. Captain Reynolds, he acknowledged stiffly. This is a private meeting. Actually, Colonel, General Brooks's aide interjected. The general has requested Captain Reynolds and her staff remain for your appointment. Confusion and the cue. First flicker of concern crossed Harlow's features as he was shown into the general's office. The door closed behind him, leaving us in tense silence. Through the door, we could hear the muffled sounds of conversation. General Brooks' deep voice alternating with Colonel Harlow's increasingly agitated responses. Twice, the colonel's voice rose enough for us to make out phrases. Blatant, insubordination, and deliberate circumvention. After 20 minutes, the door opened. Colonel Harlow emerged, his face a rigid mask, jaw clenched so tight I could almost hear his teeth grinding. Without acknowledging us, he strode from the anteroom, his back ramrod straight. Captain Reynolds, General Brooks called from his doorway. A moment more of your time. Colonel Harlow's rapid exit from General Brooks' office marked the beginning of a new phase in our ongoing conflict, one where the battlefield had shifted dramatically in our favor. As I re-entered the general's office, I found him standing by his desk, reviewing the final pages of our report with a thoughtful expression. Sit down, Captain, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. We have a few more things to, discuss. I took the offered seat, maintaining perfect posture despite the exhaustion weighing on me after days of preparation and sleepless nights. Colonel Harlow is understandably displeased with this turn of events, General Brooks began, a hint of dry humor in his tone. He came prepared to present evidence of your unauthorized resource sharing, only to discover that I'd already received your comprehensive report reframing the entire operation. Yes, sir. He's requested your immediate removal from command, citing insubordination and deliberate undermining of his authority as head of the Base Resource Committee. The general closed our report and set it aside. I denied his request. Relief washed through me, though I kept my expression professional. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Brooks's expression hardened slightly. The official reprimand stands. Additionally, I've temporarily suspended Colonel Harlow's oversight of the medical unit's resources pending a review of the budget cuts he implemented. Those cuts will remain in place until the review is complete, but your initiative will continue under my direct supervision. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. This solution satisfies protocol without sacrificing an innovative program that benefits our soldiers. But make no mistake, Captain, this arrangement places you under intense scrutiny. The slightest misstep, the smallest violation, and Colonel Harlow will have the ammunition he needs. I understand, sir. We'll operate with complete transparency. See that you do. He picked up a pen, making a note in a small leather-bound book. The Army Medical Corps leadership has already expressed interest in your initiative. If the pilot continues to show these kinds of results, it could be implemented at other installations. This was more than I'd hoped for. Not just saving my father's unit, but potentially creating a lasting impact on military medical operations Army-wide. That would be an, honor, sir. General Brooks studied me for a long moment. Your father was an innovative thinker too, you know. Always finding unconventional solutions to impossible problems. A rare smile touched his weathered face, though I don't recall him documenting his methods quite so thoroughly. Different times, sir, and different challenges. Indeed. He stood, signaling our meeting was concluding. Colonel Harlow will remain a formidable opponent, Captain. He views this as a personal humiliation, and men like Charles Harlow don't forget such things. I'm prepared for that, General. Are you? His expression was grave, because his next move won't be as direct or as visible. He's learned that lesson. As I left the General's office, his warning echoed in my mind. The battle had been won. But the war was far from over. The next few weeks brought a strange new normal to the Reynolds Medical Unit. Our initiative, now officially sanctioned, expanded and formalized. What had been an impromptu network of favors and unofficial resource sharing evolved into a structured program with proper documentation, approval processes, and performance metrics. Military efficiency experts visited to study our methods. Other unit commanders from across Fort Bragg sought our advice on resource optimization. Word spread beyond the base, bringing inquiries from medical units at installations across the country. Through it all, Colonel Harlow was conspicuously absent. He had retreated from direct confrontation, attending only required meetings where our paths might cross, maintaining rigid professionalism that never quite masked the cold anger in his eyes. "He's too quiet," Sarah observed one afternoon as we reviewed weekly performance reports. "It makes me nervous." General Brooks said the same thing, I admitted. "Harlow's planning something, we just don't know what." "Could he still get the budget cuts reinstated?" I shook my head. "Not likely. The review committee has already found several procedural issues with how he implemented them. If anything, we might see our original funding restored." "Then what's his play?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. The base hospital's emergency line. "Captain Reynolds," I answered, immediately alert. "Captain, this is Dr. Wilson at the emergency department. We have a situation you need to be aware of." The trauma surgeon's voice was carefully controlled. 2 soldiers from engineering were just brought in with severe chemical burns. They were using medical-grade sterilization equipment that malfunctioned. My stomach tightened. "What equipment exactly?" "The new portable sterilization units, the ones your initiative distributed to engineering last month." I closed my eyes briefly, the implications instantly clear. "I'm on my way. Have you notified engineering command?" "Captain Rodriguez is already here. He's extremely upset." Sarah was already grabbing her coat, having heard enough of my side of the conversation to understand something was seriously wrong. "Is anyone else at risk?" I asked, heading for the door with Sarah following. "No, the remaining units have been quarantined, but Captain..." Dr. Wilson's hesitated. "This is going to be a problem. These units passed inspection just last week." "Understood. We'll be there in 5 minutes." As we rushed to the hospital, Sarah kept pace beside me. "Equipment malfunction? The new sterilization units we provided to engineering, 2 soldiers with chemical burns." I didn't need to state the obvious. That equipment had come through our initiative, making us directly responsible. "That's impossible," Sarah insisted. "I personally oversaw the inspection of those units." "Apparently not impossible," I said grimly. The emergency department was in controlled chaos when we arrived. Dr. Wilson met us at the entrance, quickly leading us to a treatment area where 2 soldiers lay on gurneys, their arms and hands covered with chemical burns. Captain Rodriguez stood nearby, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. When he saw me, he strode over. "What the hell happened, Reynolds?" he demanded. "That equipment was supposed to be safe." "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but we'll find out." "Damn right we will," he snapped. 2 of my best men are injured because of equipment your unit provided, equipment that somehow passed inspection despite being defective. Dr. Wilson intervened. "The burns are serious but not life-threatening. Both men will recover fully with proper treatment." Small mercies, but it did little to mitigate the situation. This was exactly the kind of failure Colonel Harlow would seize upon. "I need to see those units," I said. "Where are they now?" "Quarantined in our storage facility," Rodriguez replied, slightly calmer. "Base safety is already examining them. I'll need to be present for that examination." Rodriguez nodded stiffly. "I figured as much. They're waiting for you." As I turned to leave, he caught my arm. "Jessica," he said, his voice lower, "this isn't like your team. Those inspections were thorough." "No," I agreed. "It's not." The base safety inspection revealed the horrifying truth. The sterilization units hadn't malfunctioned. They had been tampered with. Critical safety valves had been carefully adjusted to fail when the units reached operating temperature, releasing caustic cleaning agents instead of containing them. This was deliberate, the chief safety officer concluded, pointing to the modified components. Someone with technical knowledge intentionally sabotaged these units. The evidence was indisputable. This wasn't an accident or oversight. It was sabotage designed to discredit the initiative and, by extension, my leadership. "We need to check every piece of equipment distributed through the initiative," I ordered immediately. "Priority on anything that could pose a safety risk." As the inspection team dispersed, Sarah pulled me aside. "This has Harlow." written all over it. Maybe, I said cautiously, but we need proof before making that accusation. Who else would benefit from undermining the initiative like this? She was right, of course. Colonel Harlow had both motive and opportunity. As head of the Base Resource Committee, he had access to storage facilities across Fort Bragg. He also had the technical expertise to know exactly how to sabotage the equipment without leaving obvious traces. But proving it would be another matter entirely. I spent the next 12 hours overseeing emergency inspections of all equipment distributed through our network. 3 more units showed signs of similar tampering, though fortunately none had been used yet. By dawn, we had contained the threat, but the damage to the initiative's reputation was already spreading across the base. When General Brooks summoned me to his office the following morning, I arrived prepared for the worst. To my surprise, Colonel Harlow was already there, seated across from the general with an expression of grave concern that didn't quite mask the triumph in his eyes. "Captain Reynolds," General Brooks greeted me, his face grim. "I assume you're aware of why I've, called you here. The sabotage sterilization units, sir." "Yes." "Sabotaged?" Colonel Harlow repeated, eyebrows rising in perfect simulation of surprise. "That's a serious allegation, Captain. The initial reports indicated equipment failure due to inadequate inspection protocols." "The base safety report confirms tampering, Colonel," I replied evenly. "I have copies here for both of you." I placed the reports on the general's desk. Brooks picked them up immediately, scanning the technical details with a furrowed brow. "This is disturbing," he said finally. "Intentional sabotage of military equipment is a serious offense." "Indeed it is, sir," Colonel Harlow agreed smoothly. "Which raises the question of oversight. Captain Reynolds's initiative has clearly created security vulnerabilities in our supply chain. Perhaps this incident demonstrates the dangers of circumventing established procedures." And there it was, Harlow's true aim. Not just to discredit the initiative, but to use this incident to dismantle it entirely. "With respect, sir," I countered, addressing General Brooks directly. "This incident doesn't reveal weaknesses in the initiative itself, but rather in our security protocols. The same vulnerability would exist in traditional supply chains." The general looked up from the report. "Do you have any evidence regarding who might be responsible for this sabotage, Captain?" The question hung in the air. This was my opportunity to accuse Colonel Harlow directly. But without concrete evidence, such an accusation would appear desperate and vindictive. "No definitive, evidence at this time, sir. The investigation is ongoing." Colonel Harlow's lips curved in the faintest smile. General Brooks set the report aside. "Until we identify the culprit, all equipment transfers through your initiative are suspended, Captain. Additionally, I'm ordering a complete security review of all resource distribution channels at Fort Bragg." "Yes, sir." "Furthermore," he continued, "you will personally oversee new inspection protocols for all equipment already distributed. Any item that cannot be verified as safe will be immediately decommissioned." "Understood, sir." The general turned to Colonel Harlow. "Colonel, as head of the Base Resource Committee, you will assist Captain Reynolds in this security review. I expect full cooperation and complete transparency from both of you." Harlow's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, General." Dismissed. As we left the general's office, Colonel Harlow fell into step beside me, waiting until we were out of earshot before speaking. "Unfortunate incident, Captain, but perhaps inevitable given the unorthodox nature of your operation." I stopped, turning to face him directly. "We both know what this is, Colonel." His expression was a masterpiece of innocence. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating that someone deliberately sabotaged equipment to undermine the initiative and endanger soldiers. Someone with access, technical knowledge, and a vested interest in seeing the program fail." His smile returned, colder now. "Serious accusations require serious evidence, Captain. Something you notably failed to present to General Brooks. The investigation isn't complete." "No," he agreed. "It isn't. But in the meantime, your precious initiative is effectively suspended. And when the review reveals further security vulnerabilities, as it inevitably will, General Brooks will have no choice but to shut it down permanently." He leaned closer. "Sometimes victory is simply a matter of patience." As he walked away, his confidence was palpable. And for the first time since our conflict began, I felt a creeping doubt. Harlow had outmaneuvered me, not through direct confrontation, but by attacking the very foundation of trust the initiative depended on. The question wasn't whether I could prove his involvement in the sabotage. The question was whether I could restore that broken trust before everything my father had built, everything I had fought to preserve, crumbled into dust. The week following the sabotage incident was the longest of my military career. Every day brought new challenges as we implemented enhanced security protocols, conducted exhaustive equipment inspections, and tried to maintain basic operations while the initiative remained suspended. The mood across the unit had darkened. Staff who had enthusiastically embraced our innovative approach now whispered concerns about safety and security. Partner units that had eagerly participated in our resource network became hesitant, worried about potential risks. The trust we had carefully built was eroding rapidly. Working alongside Colonel Harlow during the security review only intensified the strain. He performed his assigned role with meticulous professionalism, identifying legitimate vulnerabilities in our procedures with barely concealed satisfaction. Each discovery was another nail in the initiative's coffin. "We need to find proof of Harlow's involvement," Sarah insisted during a late-night strategy session in my office. "It's the only way to save the initiative." Dr. Levinson shook his head wearily. "If such proof existed, we would have found it by now. The colonel is too careful." "So we just give up?" Sarah demanded. "Let him win?" "No," I said, finally looking up from the security report I'd been reviewing. "We don't give up, but we need to change our approach. We've been playing defense since the sabotage, reacting to Harlow's moves instead of making our own." Staff Sergeant Miller, who had been silently observing the conversation, leaned forward. "What did your father do when conventional tactics failed?" The question triggered a memory. My father sitting at our kitchen table late one night, explaining to me why he sometimes broke with military protocol. "The rules exist for a reason, Jessica," he'd said. "They provide structure and consistency, but sometimes following the letter of the law means losing sight of its spirit. When that happens, you have to remember what matters most. Not the rules themselves, but the people they're meant to protect." He went back to first principles, I answered slowly. He remembered the mission. "Which is?" Miller prompted. "Saving lives, providing the best possible care to our soldiers." I stood, sudden, clarity washing away days of uncertainty. We've been so focused on defending the initiative as a program that we've lost sight of why we created it in the first place. Sarah looked confused. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we stop trying to catch Harlow in the act. It's a game we can't win. He's too experienced, too careful." I began pacing, energy returning with purpose. "Instead, we demonstrate so convincingly that the initiative saves lives, that shutting it down becomes indefensible, regardless of who sabotaged those units." Dr. Levinson's eyes lit with understanding. "You're suggesting we prove its value is greater than its vulnerabilities." "Exactly. We compile irrefutable evidence that even with additional security measures, the initiative delivers better medical care more efficiently than traditional systems." "General Brooks is pragmatic," Miller observed. "If we can show him the tangible benefits outweigh the risks, he'll reinstate the program," I finished. "Not because he trusts us, but because it's the right decision for the soldiers under his command." Sarah frowned. "And Colonel Harlow gets away with endangering soldiers?" "For now," I acknowledged. "But this isn't about punishment or vindication. It's about preserving what matters. The medical unit my father built and the lives it saves every day." As they left my office, I remained behind, staring at my father's photograph on the wall, taken during his final deployment, standing proud in front of the medical unit that now bore his name. "I hope I'm making the right call, Dad," I murmured, to the silent image. The next morning, I requested a meeting with General Brooks. To my surprise, he agreed to see me immediately, alone. "Captain Reynolds," he greeted me as I entered his office. "I trust you have updates on the security review?" "Not directly, sir." I placed a new report on his desk. Not the security assessment he expected, but something far more important. "This is a comprehensive analysis of the initiative's impact on medical outcomes at Fort Bragg over the past 3 months." The general's eyebrows rose slightly. "I asked for security protocols, Captain." "I understand, sir. Those reviews continue. But I believe this information is equally relevant to your decision regarding the initiative's future." Brooks regarded me for a long moment before picking up the report. "Very well. What am I looking at?" "Data, sir. Specifically medical response times, treatment success rates, and patient outcomes before and after the initiative's implementation." He flipped through the pages, his expression gradually shifting from skepticism to interest. "These numbers are significant." "Yes, sir. Emergency response times decreased by 23% on average. Treatment success rates for combat-related injuries improved by 17%. And most importantly, The predicted survival rate for critical field injuries increased by nearly 20%. The general looked up. Predicted based on what? Comparative analysis using historical data and standardized medical assessment models. We applied the same methodologies used by the Defense Medical Readiness Training Institute. I paused to let the implications sink in. In practical terms, sir, for every 100 critically wounded soldiers we treat, 20 more will survive because of the resources and capabilities provided by the initiative. Brooks set down the report, studying me with newfound intensity. You're making a utilitarian argument, Captain. The benefits outweigh the risks. I'm making a command argument, sir. As officers, we constantly balance risks against mission objectives. If a tactical approach improves mission success by 20%, we accept considerably greater risks than we're facing with the initiative. The difference being that tactical risks are taken in combat situations, not on our home base where soldiers should be safe. With respect, sir, medical readiness is a combat function. The training, equipment, and procedures we establish here directly impact survival rates in the field. The general leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Colonel Harlow argues that these same benefits could be achieved through traditional channels without the security vulnerabilities. He's wrong, sir. I kept my voice calm despite the boldness of the statement. The data proves it. We've included comparative analyses with traditional resource models. None achieve the same results within current budget constraints. General Brooks fell silent, contemplating the report before him. Finally, he looked up. You still have no evidence regarding who sabotaged that equipment? No conclusive evidence, sir, I admitted. But the investigation continues. He nodded slowly. I'll review this report. Thoroughly, Captain. In the meantime, continue the security assessment with Colonel Harlow. Dismissed. 3 days later, I received orders to report to the General's conference room rather than his office. When I arrived, I found not only General Brooks and Colonel Harlow, but also several senior officers from Fort Bragg Command and 2 representatives from the Army Medical Corps headquarters. My stomach tightened at the formality of the arrangement. This wasn't a casual meeting. It was a formal review. Captain Reynolds, General Brooks began once I was seated, we've completed our evaluation of the Integrated Resource Optimization Initiative, including both the security vulnerabilities identified by Colonel Harlow and the performance metrics you provided. Colonel Harlow sat perfectly, still his expression revealing nothing, though I could sense tension radiating from him. The security concerns are legitimate, Brooks continued. The distributed nature of resource allocation creates challenges for inventory control and quality assurance. However, he glanced down at his notes. The performance improvements are equally undeniable. The initiative has demonstrably enhanced medical readiness and care quality at Fort Bragg. One of the Medical Corps representatives, a silver-haired colonel I recognized as the Deputy Director of Operations, leaned forward. Captain Reynolds, we've thoroughly reviewed your data. The results are impressive enough that Medical Corps Command has expressed interest in evaluating this model for potential implementation across multiple installations. Colonel Harlow's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Therefore, General Brooks announced, we've reached a decision. The initiative will be reinstated with additional security protocols as outlined by Colonel Harlow's review. Furthermore, it will be expanded into a formal pilot program under joint oversight from Fort Bragg Command and Army Medical Corps headquarters. Relief washed through me, though I maintained my professional composure. Thank you, sir. We'll implement all recommended security measures immediately. Additionally, Brooks continued, in recognition of the initiative's success and the leadership demonstrated in its development, I am recommending you for promotion to Major Captain Reynolds. The board will review your file next month. The Psalmseer announcement stunned me into momentary silence. Colonel Harlow's face had gone rigid, a muscle working in his cheek. As for the matter of the equipment sabotage, the general added, his tone hardening, the investigation has yielded new evidence. He nodded to his aide, who distributed copies of a security report. As I scanned the document, my breath caught. It detailed surveillance footage and access logs showing Lieutenant Ryan Harlow entering the storage facility where the sterilization units were kept, 2 days before the incident. Lieutenant Harlow was recorded accessing the equipment without authorization, General Brooks stated. When confronted with this evidence this morning, he confessed to tampering with the units on direct orders from Colonel Harlow. All eyes turned to Colonel Harlow, whose face had drained of color. The lieutenant provided written testimony and supporting communications. Brooks continued implacably. Colonel Harlow, you are hereby relieved of duty pending investigation for conduct unbecoming an officer, endangerment of military personnel, and misuse of authority. Military police are waiting outside to escort you to detention. Harlow's composure finally cracked. This is absurd. My nephew is lying to save himself. The evidence suggests otherwise, Colonel. One of the senior officers replied coldly, including recorded phone conversations between you and the lieutenant. As military police entered the room, Colonel Harlow rose shakily to his feet. His eyes found mine, burning with hatred. This isn't over, Reynolds. Actually, Colonel, General Brooks interrupted. It is. After Harlow was escorted out, the meeting concluded with logistical details about the initiative's formal reinstatement. As the others filed out, General Brooks motioned for me to remain behind. Your father would be proud, Major, he said once we were alone, using the rank I didn't yet officially hold. Not just of what you've accomplished, but how you accomplished it. Thank you, sir. Though I confess I'm surprised about Lieutenant Harlow's confession. A ghost of a smile touched Brooks's lips. Are you? The lieutenant requested transfer to Lewis McCord weeks ago, around the same time he brought you evidence of his uncle's investigation. He's been cooperating with our counter-investigation since then. Understanding dawned. You knew? I suspected. The lieutenant approached me shortly after warning you about his uncle's plans. Said something about choosing integrity over family loyalty. A choice I suspect was influenced by your father's example during the lieutenant's brief rotation in the medical unit. The revelation left me momentarily speechless. There's a lesson here, Reynolds, Brooks continued, about the kind of leadership that inspires others to do the right thing, even at personal cost. Your father understood that. It seems you do too. As I left the conference room, the weight I'd carried since my father's passing felt lighter somehow. The medical unit would continue, stronger now with formal support and recognition. The program we'd built would expand, potentially saving lives across the Army. And the legacy my father had left, not just a unit bearing his name, but a standard of integrity and innovation, would endure. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Fort Bragg. I paused on the steps, thinking of my father's dog tags still resting against my chest. I'd worn them every day since his passing, a physical reminder of the promise I'd made to protect what he'd built. Perhaps it was time to carry that legacy differently, not as a burden of protection, but as a foundation for growth, not just preserving what had been, but building something new that honored its spirit. Captain Reynolds? Sarah was approaching, curiosity written across her face. How did it go? Surprisingly well, I said, smiling. The initiative has been formally approved. Colonel Harlow has been relieved of command pending investigation. And apparently, I'm being recommended for promotion. Her eyes widened. Major Reynolds. It has a nice ring to it. It does, doesn't it? I started walking toward the medical unit, Sarah falling into step beside me. We have work to do. New security protocols to implement, expansion plans to develop, and a celebration to plan, she added. The staff will want to mark the occasion. I nodded, thinking of the officers' dinner where this had all begun. Colonel Harlow sliding transfer papers across the table, smirking as he offered me 25% of my father's legacy. Yes, I agreed. I think a celebration is definitely in order. As we reached the medical building, I paused once more, looking up at the sign bearing my father's name. Major David Reynolds had built something special here. Not just a medical unit, but a standard of integrity, innovation, and service. It was a standard I would continue to uphold, one soldier at a time.